In this mini lecture, we'll be non-contingent punishment. Now, last week we talked about negative reinforcement. So remember, the two categories of negative reinforcement are and avoidance. So in typical escape procedures, it's controllable. So you perform a behavior, and that behavior is reinforced by allowing or avoid something that's to control your exposure to the aversive through your behavior. Also, with punishment procedures, the animal or the person has some control, because if it doesn't make the response, then if you don't perform a particular behavior, you are not exposed to the aversive punishment. So again, you have control over what happens. So in both these cases, reinforcement and there is some contingent. What happens to you is contingent on the behavior you perform or do not perform. With non-contingent, the aversive stimulus is uncontrollable. It's not contingent upon the animal's or the person's behavior. So what happens to you is not a result of the behavior that you. So when you're faced with non-contingent punishment that's not based on your behavior, there are a few things that can happen. The first is learned helplessness. This is a decrement in learning that results from repeated exposure to uncontrollable aversive events. When you have been exposed to things that are aversive that you cannot control, you learn that your behavior does not have any effect on your exposure to these aversive events. So because you've learned this, you have difficulty in the future learning that your behavior controls your exposure to aversive. So you learn to be helpless. You learn that your behavior does not control what happens to you. So there are a few different examples of helplessness. Here looking at our little picture. You can train an elephant when it's young. You tie it up with a rope or a chain, and at that time the elephant is too young and too weak to break. So the elephant, I cannot escape from this. Now, when the elephant grows up, of course, gets bigger and stronger, you can continue to restrain the elephant with the same rope or chain, even though when it's being strong, it can actually break. It's already learned when it's young that it cannot escape that. So it doesn't. So it's learned that it's, even though at that point it could, it doesn't, because it's already learned it cannot. The same is true with people. There have been studies that give children problems that cannot be solved. And so the children work on the problems and realize that they cannot solve them. They then give them problems that they're capable of solving, and they don't, because they've already learned that they are incapable of solving those problems. So difficulty in learning that they can actually influence their environment, that they are capable of solving problems. You know, I always talk about how I use these for my teaching. And so, you know, this theory helps develop my syllabi, in that I always try to start the semester with an assignment that students can do well on. So in my graduate classes, I give the Know Your Syllabus assignment, which essentially is just copying down information from your. So I do that so everybody starts the semester on an assignment. I get 100 on that first assignment, hopefully, and that lets them, I'm capable of being successful with my students online. I start introduction. That's simply, you know, introducing yourself to your class. Everyone should get 100% on that. So you start the semester with a sense of accomplishment and learn again that you can be successful in the course. So the good thing about this learned helpless is that it works the other way up. If people being successful, even when they're in more difficult situations, they will persist because they've learned that they can be successful. So take the opposite. If you children, they're able to, if you give them more difficult, they will persist and continue to problems because they've learned that. So if you start off giving experiences where they will continue to try to excel and be successful when placed in more difficult situations. Something else that can from exposure to non-contingent is Masterman's experiment. And we talked about experiment. So animals or people exposed to uncontrollable aversive often develop neurotic. So neurotic symptoms are things restlessness, which is like physical with hyper, where they're constantly looking around for. And so these symptoms are similar to people experience post-traumatic stress. So these people show the same types of restlessness, agitation, hypervigilance in response to being exposed to trauma. And so these traumatic symptoms are more easily induced when aversive stimuli are delivered in an environment that the animal has long associated with safety. So think about if you are attacked in your home as opposed to being attacked on an unfamiliar street. You're more likely to develop these types of symptoms of trauma if you're attacked in your home, because this is a place you associate with safety, a place where you associate a positive event. So if you're attacked, if your safety is violated, and you're more likely to be traumatized than if you're attacked on an unfamiliar street that you don't already have those positive, good associations with. So both animals in the lab and people in the lab, when you're exposed to punishment that you don't have control over, punishment that's not a result of your behavior, you tend to develop these more neurotic symptoms in response to exposure to that trauma.